we convert 12% of global construction to bamboo-based materials. We could actually be addressing 1/3 of human emissions every year.
Welcome to the Bullseye Breakdown, the podcast where CEOs, founders, and leaders of industry break down big decisions, big wins, and big lessons. No fluff, just real talk. Let's get into it. This is the Bullseye Breakdown. Welcome back. We're so excited to have you here today. We have an excellent show prepared for you. We're so lucky to have David Sands here with us today. He is the founder and chief innovations officer of Rizome Bamboo, as well as Bamboo Living. David Sands.
Thank you, Justin. Great to be here. Yes.
I'm so excited to have you here. We have been back and forth in kind of prepping for this interview, and your world is so intriguing to me. It is
Thank you.
So vast and big, and there's so many moving parts, but everything you're doing is so beneficial to the planet. I'm excited to hear more about it. First marks. What I would love to do is I'd love to just start out and just hear a little bit about you. I understand that you're a celebrated architect. You have 2 thriving businesses that are focusing around bamboo and what bamboo can do for the planet. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you found yourself where you are today.
Sure. Yeah, I was trained as an architect. I actually worked for the sustainability head for Virginia in architecture for a summer and got really inspired. Well, I was already inspired about working on environmental solutions. And then I started the first company, Bamboo Living, after I built a house for myself and trying to be sustainable as I could be. It was completely off-grid, photovoltaic. And this was on Maui, and one of the big hotels had recently modeled and pulled out of these giant mahogany doors. So I bought like 50 of them for practically nothing and turned them into all the walls of the house, except for the sheer walls. It was a fun project. It was a pavilion in the jungle. The only thing was, when they delivered the lumber for the framing of the house, I just thought, ugh, this is a whole forest going into a single home. And I just thought, I can't really be part of this. I got to figure out something else. So that's the friend that helped me build that house was a contractor, and he and I started Bamboo Living together.
Where you currently are focusing the majority of your energy, which is Rizome.
Sure. Yeah. So I started Bamboo Living in 95. Again, after building that house, I thought I've got to do something different. The friend that I started Bamboo Living with had just gone to the World Bamboo Congress in Bali and got inspired about construction with bamboo. I'd been to Bali the previous year and met Linda Garland, who was very inspiring to me. She had 2 covers of Architectural Digest that year with her bamboo houses. And I thought, this is something I could get excited about, not cutting trees. The bamboo is rapidly renewable. So when you harvest it, you're not killing the plant. It's like mowing the lawn. It just stimulates more growth.
Yeah. Bamboo in certain parts of the U.S. is almost a bad word. We
Sure.
have a little bit of an invasive bamboo problem.
Understood.
And so, yeah, when I first started talking to you, I was intrigued because I saw obviously what you're doing with bamboo, and we'll obviously get into that a little bit later.
Sure.
But my cursory knowledge of bamboo is, man, that's the stuff that I can't get rid of out of the backside of my yard. It just, you cut it down and it's like it comes back in full force twofold. So.
Right. Well, there's 2 types of bamboo. There's running bamboo, which most of the temperate bamboos are that type. It can be very invasive. What we're using are the tropical timber bamboos. They're the fastest growing plants on the planet, essentially. Like if you look up Guinness Book of Records, it's one of the big timber bamboos that almost 1 meter a day of growth. Pretty amazing.
That's crazy. And I mean, those trunks are pretty massive too, right?
Yeah.
They're averaging
exactly.
8 to 10 inches thick.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I say trunks, the correct term is shoots, correct?
Yeah. They start out as a shoot, and they're the poles are called culms. That's the technical name for them. And
well, cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's obviously very exciting. I love immediately that you're so focused on sustainability, renewability, and in an industry where aesthetic is so important and oftentimes sustainability and renewability is overlooked. You have been a pathfinder for many, many years. You just said you started Bamboo Living in 1995. Nobody was thinking about sustainability in 1995. There was not one thing. I mean, like the only solar powered thing I think I had was my Texas Instruments, calculator at that point.
Sure.
Great solar cells on those batteries. Those things work. So, to hear that you were looking at how to be sustainable and off grid and utilizing a renewable energy source all the way back then, it really gives credence to where you are today and how that has transitioned. So understanding where Bamboo Living was and where you have been building momentum with that business, how did Rizome come into the mix? Like where
Sure.
did that come in? Because I'm really excited for you to be able to share what the vision of that company is.
Yeah, you bet. Back in '09, I realized that bamboo could be a potential solution for addressing atmospheric CO2. I'd seen some studies that showed the atmospheric CO2 uptake of some of the species of bamboo. And again, being the fastest growing woody plants on Earth, I thought this could be a really good strategy. So I wrote up a paper, I submitted it to a conference in Bangkok, and I got accepted 2 weeks before that conference. The top researcher in the world, a German scientist named Walter Lise, related his paper to all the other speakers, including me, about why bamboo did not work for carbon sequestration. And that
That's
was like,
always fun to receive,
yeah,
right? Isn't that
exactly.
exciting?
Exactly. So I thought, uh-oh. But then I read Walter's paper and I thought, oh, this is exactly what I need. I need to address every one of the issues he raises, and then I could end up with a good strategy. So I wrote that up. I sent it to Walter. He said, yeah, that would work. Meet me ahead of the conference and I'll help you work out the details. So that was pretty exciting. And yeah, so just, that's one of the neat things about the folks in the, bamboo community seem to be really, collaborative, I would say. Yeah. So
I think that there's a generalized goal, which is everybody understands. You've already talked about the sustainability. Obviously, it's a fast growing
right.
product. I think that to your point there, in any other like situation where someone may have written a counterpoint paper to what your life's work up to that point was, it'd be devastating. And, kudos to you for taking that moment and looking at that paper and not just completely giving up, because that is something we talk about on the show a lot, which is having the drive to keep pushing forward, to not hit a wall and realize, well, it's just not going to work,
Sure. Yeah.
And so having that drive to say, all right, think, adapt. I'm being faced with something that is literally discounting everything that I've worked to this point. What can I do to take this, shift it, spin it, and find a silver lining or a new door to open or a way to move forward? That's amazing. That's a quality that not everybody has. And that's just kind of a testament to where you are in where you are headed with what you're doing.
Well, thank you.
So,
I appreciate that. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and the piece is that Walter was looking at bamboo in the wild as it currently was at that time and how it was being utilized. So bamboo is not a tree. You can't just plant it and leave it for 100 years and expect it to just keep increasingly drawing down carbon. It's the bamboo poles themselves have about a 10-year life. So you need to extract them each year to open up the sun space for the plant to stimulate growth. And then you need to take those poles and turn them into durable products. So it doesn't work to make chopsticks or toothpicks or things like that. It needs to be something that's locking up that carbon for many decades. And of course, building materials are perfect for that.
Yeah. Yeah. So there was a light bulb moment that basically hit when you saw those two papers coming together, and you started working through kind of what the issues that he had presented. So that light bulb moment for you was, well, wait a second, we might be onto something here.
Yeah, exactly.
So that said, tell everybody what Rizome actually is and what you're
Sure.
looking to do.
Sure. Well, an interesting another moment similar was I submitted us for the Carbon Removal X Prize, and we were considered one of the top, entries for that. The piece with that was I looked at our, the information from the harvest teams, the factory, and all of that, and did calculations based on that. And I thought, we convert 12% of global construction to bamboo-based materials, we could actually be addressing 1/3 of human emissions every year ongoing. And
1/3 of human carbon emissions by 12% of the global construction.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah. It is. It really is. And so, I'd written that up, and of course, I'm not a scientist, and I presented it.
You could have fooled me at this point, David.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, I would say I'm an optimist, and
okay.
I'm always looking at the highest possibility. And so we were seeing, it's really big bamboo, and seeing replacement of the culms on an annual basis, and being able to make building materials and then use the waste for making biochar. And so, I wrote that up, and then I ended up making a paper for the Asian Development Bank, and I did a presentation to them, and a couple of years go by, and they come back and say, hey, it's basically, they did a conference and a video outlining the using the outline that I had given them for the bamboo climate solution. And last year, I went to a conference in Taiwan, and one of the top scientists in working with bamboo did a paper on using bamboo for climate impact. And that was the first time I'd heard that from somebody in the scientific community. So he and I are now collaborating on a scientific paper that will, elaborate the bamboo climate strategy, basically. Again, using the non-invasive tropical giant bamboos. And it ends up being a driver for getting reforestation done in the tropics by providing an economic engine to, quickly stimulate the planting.
Yeah. So just to kind of wrap that up and maybe bring it back in layman's terms. So what you are looking to do is expand planting, growth, and cultivation of these old growth, large format bamboo poles, which can grow up to 1 meter a day, which will work to reduce carbon emissions by up to 1/3 of where we're at in the long run, in terms of what your plan is.
Yeah.
But one thing that you just hit on right there, which is really intriguing, is the reforestation of areas of the world in the tropics that have been clear cut and just left bare. That is something that blew my mind when you first said that, because as a planet, we're constantly trying to figure out how to work past our environmental, shall I say, discrepancies that we have chosen to pursue over the course of the past century. But what we had briefly talked about off camera was the ability to take places like the Amazon and start to actually reforest them with a habitat that would be fairly native to what is currently there, giving the ability for these Amazonian jungle areas that have been completely clear cut for use in the global timber market to start to see a little bit of a rebound and a taking back of the areas of the world that we have taken away from those true rainforest, tropical forest, slightly temperate forest scenarios, correct?
Well, yeah. So an example is the planting the bamboo in the Amazon area. What I'm thinking is really start with the Atlantic rainforest, which is there's only about 10% of it left. It's all ranch land now. Reforesting in those areas would be an incredible piece of the puzzle.
Where is that? Just for people
Sure.
who don't know where that
Yeah,
is.
so it's Brazil. It's outside of Sao Paulo. It's on the coast. So the logistics are much easier.
Right.
We actually looked at doing a project in the upper Amazon and the logistics are just difficult. So the people were incredible and I love that side of it. But the reforesting areas that have been deforested for generations would be a huge piece of the puzzle, particularly these areas like the Atlantic rainforest. And there's huge areas here. In the Philippines, I always have to translate between hectares and
Acres.
acres. Yeah. So there's about 7.5 million hectares, which is just under 20 million acres of deforested land in the Philippines. It was clear cut, logged, and not replanted. And so it's converted to grassland and it's not being used for agriculture. And it's really an opportunity to create a working forest and provide livelihood for the forest dwellers. So that's what we're doing here. We're working with indigenous communities to help them reforest their ancestral domains. And what's fascinating about that is that we give them the plants, we pay them to plant the plants, we pay them to maintain the plants, and then we buy the poles from them when the bamboo is mature. They own the land, they own the bamboo, and it becomes a multi-generational source of income and an asset for those communities. So it's a huge win-win.
Well, and we got ahead of ourselves there for a second because we started talking about the Amazon, because I mean, ultimately that's where, like, when you talk about deforestation, generally people
Sure.
are going to be like, oh yeah, we're cutting down the Amazon.
Right.
But you bring up the Philippines, and I should backtrack for a second too.
Sure.
And we'll get into this a little bit more in depth when we talk about you and your
Sure.
journey and kind of where you're at. But so Bamboo Living is based in Hawaii.
Right.
Rizome is also an American company, but it is, for all intents and purposes, based in Manila, which is where you currently are.
That's where yeah, exactly. I'm here in Manila, but we're also doing a project in Florida right now. So, yeah, it's already kind of spread around.
You're worldwide. You're everywhere.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then I put together a proposal for the state of Hawaii and sent it to one of the top advisors for the governor, and they said, let's do it. So it's basically converting the old sugarcane land to growing the bamboo, because now it's all
under that same auspice of paying locals to plant, cultivate, under that same kind of guise of creating jobs and generational opportunities for wealth for people that have not necessarily had it, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So backing up for a second and talking about the Philippines, because generally speaking, in your business plan, in the way that Rizome is headed, you're working towards really affecting the Philippines first, because as you said, there's somewhat north of 20 million acres or 7 million hectares of usable space in the Philippines with an indigenous population that can truly be uplifted with this opportunity.
Right. And in fact, we've already seen it. Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, one of the indigenous communities that we did a planting program with, a year later, they're able to build themselves houses, so it's really life-changing for them.
Yeah. Because a lot of the time, these people, the indigenous, areas and villages that you would be going to, they have nothing, right? There's not a lot.
It's really tough. Yeah. They're in the most remote areas, and really, the land was cleared for logging. It was, I think, the way it worked was the government had claimed the land. They gave logging concessions to these big international logging companies. The land was logged over, and then finally the indigenous groups got title to their, ancestral lands, but now it's deforested.
Yeah,
So
what are you going to do with it?
yeah, exactly.
You have an idea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, and real quickly, just in terms of, talking about the deforestation, and you hit on it, but I definitely want people to understand what this really means and how it changes the perception of logging and the timber and lumber industry in general. So I have a lot of experience. I worked in woodworking manufacturing for almost a decade and helped run
Yeah.
a factory here. So I understand pine very
Yeah.
well. Pine tree takes about 7 years to grow to where it's able to be cultivated in a 7 to 10 inch log. And you cut it down and you start the process over. So you get 2 trees every 14 years. The difference in what we're talking about here is, to your point, it grows 1 meter a day. The bamboo is something that equivocally is basically you're going to get 14 to 16 poles of equivocal lumber or the equivocal growth in that same 14 years.
So it's
If not
actually
more.
what happens is the first 7 years, the plant's getting established and you start harvesting at about year 7. We're looking at about 7 poles a year coming off of the plant. It could end up being more than that. That's what we were seeing in Mindanao, was more like 10 poles a year. But even at that, what it is you're getting that every year after it's mature, and that runs for 100 and 120 years. So that's where the difference is.
So just to do some quick math and put it all together here,
Yeah.
you get, across a 14-year time span, you get 2 pine trees.
Sure.
Okay. Across a 14-year time span, you could get up to 70, potentially 80 poles of bamboo out of the same area of space, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. There's the potential for that. Yeah. Yeah.
Sure.
We're
Sure.
modeling, I think about, 50 poles during that time.
In wrapping it all up and bringing it together,
Yeah. Sure.
let me just make sure I got this right. So you are building out a company that is reforesting the world, is taking a lumber industry and essentially making it to where we create opportunity and product in an exponential system.
Mm-hmm.
You're giving people who have essentially nothing a life,
Uh-huh.
an income, a
Yeah.
purpose. And while you're doing it, you're saving the planet.
Yeah. It's amazing how that works.
Isn't it funny? Isn't it funny how when you do good things and you have good ideas, like good
Yeah.
things come of it?
Yeah.
Well, hopefully now the viewers can see why I was so excited to talk to you, and why every time I do talk to you, you blow my mind every time I have a chance to sit down and chat with you in sense of what you're doing, because it seems like every time I talk to you, there's another layer to this process that it's like, can this get any better?
Right.
Can this get any better for everybody involved? It's mind blowing for me. So
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
well, you're quite welcome. And I want to move on to talking more a little bit about you, and a little
Okay.
bit about, what makes David Sands, push forward through those walls. This is a section of the podcast that I like to call the pressure test. When did you decide that you wanted to go ahead and start your own thing and found a company, found Bamboo Living? I know you kind of touched on it. What was that key point that you're like, I don't want to work for the Sustainability Commission. I don't want to just design things. I want to go down this path.
Sure. It was really, with the bamboo specifically, it was building that house on Maui and seeing the lumber arrive and realizing, after having been in the Northwest and seeing big clear cuts there, that was a good chunk of a forest that went into that house. And I just thought I'm trying to be sustainable, and I just, need to figure out a different way to do things. I'd always sort of had that interest, Yeah, just, as a kid, we were out camping almost every month, and I played in a bamboo grove that was over 120 years old. That, the friend that's the chairman of Rizome, it was his family's property, and we even made a raft that made it to the middle of the lake before it sunk. And then even as a Boy Scout, we were making bridges and towers out of bamboo. It was fun. It's just something that enjoyed.
So it's been kind of lifelong for you
Yeah.
in
Yeah,
terms
that's
of
true.
figuring it out. But the moment that key moment that you could say like, hey, I want to actually dedicate my life to some change was when
Mhm.
you had that lumber arrive. And it's admirable.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, I was going to change careers at that point because I couldn't immediately figure out what I was going to do about it. And then the friend, Jeffrey, that I started Bamboo Living with called me up and said, hey, let's do something with bamboo together. And I thought, yeah, that's it. Let's do it.
That's a ticket.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. You've been doing this a few years.
Yeah, right.
You said you started Bamboo Living in '95. What's a mistake that you made that you've learned from? Something that you may have early on or yesterday. It doesn't matter. We always make mistakes. We're human.
Sure.
What's a big one that you can remember?
Yeah. It's really, I can't really call them exactly mistakes, but putting 2 years into getting that project up and running in Brazil and then having it come apart in a week, that was really challenging. But we were doing everything we thought was the right thing at the time. And I would say that's probably been the case multiple times over the years where think we're doing the right thing and we're trying, and, you get feedback and say, okay, well, we need to adjust here. I think one of the things was we were going to, early on, we were saying, okay, this needs to be a prefabricated system. But our first houses took, forever to put together. So it was kind of like, keep going back to ground zero and figure out what does work and stop doing what doesn't work. Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds to me that, it's funny. I ask this question a lot, and I feel like most people immediately are like, I can't really remember an exact mistake. But once you start kind of delving into it, I think
Yeah.
there's a common thread amongst founders and CEOs. It's like, I make mistakes all the time. It's kind of habit. We have to sit here and make 1,000 decisions on a daily basis. And you're not going to be, if I was batting 1,000 at it, then I should move to baseball. But the reality is that like, you can't be perfect on every single decision you can't be perfect on every single easy for me to say decision that you make.
Yeah.
And it's like how you adapt off of those. We've already talked in this interview about how, you've hit walls, and it seems like through no fault of your own, there's been multiple times that you hit walls.
Sure.
And I think any great company, any great leader, any great visionary or innovator, CEO, founder, you're going to hit those walls. And it reminds me of a story for this gentleman from Pennsylvania who strikes out to Colorado during the gold rush, and he pools $300,000 from everybody in his town in Pennsylvania to go start a claim. And he hits some gold, everything's great, and he puts basically all of his effort into it, gets all this money, and actually creates a working mine on his claim. He pulls out 3 loads, and there's decent gold in there, and just starts tapering off. And he works through, probably 6 months of this, and gets no more gold. And he's hitting this wall, right? And so he's got to make a decision, and he decides to fold, to pack it in. Doesn't know what to do. Doesn't see the way around this. So he takes all his equipment down to the base of the mountain to a junkyard. Sells all of his equipment to the owner of this junkyard, and the owner of the junkyard says, hey, where's your claim? Can I buy that from you too? So he buys the claim, buys all this equipment, 10 cents on the dollar, probably less than that. And the gentleman goes back to Pennsylvania and, lives the rest of his life. Junkyard owner hires a surveyor, goes back out to the claim. And what he realized very quickly is that he had the previous gentleman made a course correction in his mining and got off track. And the junkyard owner started the mine back up and mined 3 feet and hit a vein of gold that pulled millions of dollars out of that mine across a decade. And so it's always, to me, it's like 3 more feet.
Right.
In my darkest day, I sit there and I think 3 more feet. This wall there's got to be a way around it.
Yeah.
And as frustrated or as upset in everything that I've been doing in my own personal business and in my own personal life over the course of my career, it's always 3 more feet because there's an answer if you push on it.
Right.
And that's one thing that in hearing what you've talked about thus far in this podcast, you can do on a regular basis. Most people, if they're working on a project in Brazil and they've spent 2 years of their life and it just in 1 week dissolves, 95% of people, David, would be like, that's it. I'm done. I'm going to go, I guess I'm going to go, design mobile homes. That's what it is for me. I'm going to just swing the other end of the pendulum. So I've already said it, but to be able to have that perseverance and that drive to get through those walls, to drive that 3 more feet, it's not a quality everybody has, David.
Understood.
And it's really impressive.
Well, thank you. And I think it's also the willingness to pivot, is saying, okay, that didn't work, but this is still a good idea. And, we moved from Brazil to Vietnam, where we'd been working for 30 years, but it still didn't have the giant bamboo there. It was kind of a second grade species. And I just, thought, to make this really work, it needs to be kind of optimized out of the gate. And so, there's some kind of magic to it all when you do persevere. So I kept hearing when I was the first time I was in the Philippines about the giant bamboo, but nobody seemed to know where it was. So we kept pursuing that, found it. And then one of my neighbors, who was one of my earlier investors, he had a friend who invested, who had a friend who worked in the Philippines, and he had a friend who was still in the Philippines. His boss, he thought his boss would really be interested in what we were doing. And his boss introduced us to Cito, who's become our partner here, the former Secretary of Agriculture. So we get Cito, and, we're showing him where we're doing the harvesting of the bamboo. And he says, my dad planted all that bamboo. It's a wild ride.
It's unbelievable. And it's sometimes it's like when it's just meant to happen, weird things like that.
Yeah. It's just that persistence to, okay, well, just keep going somehow.
Just 3 more feet.
3 more feet.
3 more feet.
Exactly.
That's
exactly.
right.
Yeah.
I'm going to get that tattooed somewhere on my body because it's like, I don't have any tattoos. I'd do it for that. Anyway, well, let's move on. You actually gave us a good opportunity to pivot into the next section of the podcast, which I like to call Scaling Secrets. As you are going down your path and you're building out your business, not everything is always a straight line. You have to move. You have to be nimble. You have to be light on your feet and able to take the adversity as it comes with you and shift the direction in which your company is heading. We just spoke about the necessity to pivot from when you were in Brazil and everything went to pot very quickly. You pivoted. You saw another angle. You didn't give up. You said, okay,
right.
We need to make a decision and turn. Not everybody's decision takes them from one side of the planet to the other. You seem to be doing that on a daily basis. Could see you there. But let's talk about that pivoting. When you are faced with these massive turning points, how do you view these opportunities to pivot? What's the decision-making process that says, screw it, let's go to Vietnam?
Yeah. I'd say the piece behind it, the driving piece behind it, is that it's too important not to keep this going. The opportunity to make a difference at a global scale is there and for real, and we just need to figure out how to do that. And the again, even going back to bamboo living, when we were first getting started and we got our first few houses approved, we realized pretty quickly we needed a national building code standard. And so with what little funds we had, we kind of started working with the organization that writes 90% of the building code in the U.S. And in that process, I thought, well, we really need assistance with this. And there was a committee that was working on building codes for bamboo. And I got myself and the vice president of the code writing organization invited onto that committee just by persistence. It ended up being a critical path element to getting that national building code standard. Familiarity with it was working with engineers from around the world and bringing the vice president up to, kind of what would I say, very quickly to understanding it as a high grade construction material and what the challenges were and what the opportunities were really made the difference in terms of getting it into the building code.
Sure. Tell me, we've talked about what Rizome's baseline is. What is the product that you're bringing to the table? And how are you scaling to meet those demands?
Yeah, you bet. So what we're doing right now is we're taking giant bamboo and turning it into little boards, like little slats. They're 8 to 10 feet long. And then we turn them into lumber like this. And this becomes beams that we're now up to 39 feet. And actually, we're doing a project right now that's 54 feet with curved beams. And then there's one in the works for 33 meters, so about 100-foot span. So we're just, we keep ramping up. Yeah. And so we're working with Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill, who did the Burj Khalifa on a hybrid 55-story building with structural bamboo.
Yeah, the Burj Khalifa is by far and away one of my favorite buildings in the entirety of the world. It's one of the most beautiful hotels in the world, and it is one of the most innovative designs that was ever brought to table, and has really kind of moved architecture in a way, specifically in that area of the world, that we've never really seen. It's moving away from boxes and trying to find natural lines and the beauty of the nature that it surrounds. So that's amazing. And I can only imagine a 55-story building that is made out of bamboo. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's coming. Yeah.
So as you're growing that, and one of the things that you and I have talked a little bit about off camera is you have to be able to figure out how to provide this product. You have, 7 million hectares that you're looking to plant by, you said.
Yeah, we're finishing.
You're looking to do that by 2040?
No. 4 million hectares by 2040. And then the goal would be to get up to, 20 million, 22 million by 2050. So, just ramping up like that.
So in terms of scaling, obviously you have all the planting kind of in place. Then you have the manufacturing process.
Right.
And
you
guys are currently in that scaling effort right now to where you can create the product that is then able to be sold on a mass scale, correct?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So right now, our first factory, it takes about a week to go from a bamboo pole to, this kind of stuff, beams and plywood and all of that. And our manufacturing expert used to run the largest plywood mill in the world, as well as pretty much every other kind of wood mill. And so he has designed a high-speed mill that'll turn that bamboo pole into plywood and beams in 24 hours. So we're working on that right now, getting it funded and getting the first one up and running.
So that's interesting. So you guys have gone through a first round of funding, and you're now looking to do an expansion round of funding.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like and how hard it is?
Yeah, it's can be a challenge, but it's never boring. And so we did, when we got here to the Philippines, we were able to, find a Series A investor. It's a member-owned cooperative bank, like a credit union. Half of there is 450,000 members, and half of them are farmers. So they were very interested in this as building an industry for their constituents. So that really helped us get this first factory up and running and get our first planting programs done. And then this next step that we're doing is what they call a Series B. It's about 30 million in an equity raise. But at the same time, we're working on putting together like a $300 million revolving fund that would be done as a special purpose vehicle joint venture to scale this to get to that 4 million hectares by 2040. So, we need a lot of kind of support in doing that. The numbers are pretty amazing. The returns are quite good in terms of the productivity of the bamboo and the fiber and all of that. So that's really the opportunity, is figuring out, how to build a global team. And we're working with, folks both out of the carbon side and from former McKinsey folks in terms of scaling a business to a global level. We're learning a lot in that process too.
The moving parts are, you obviously have the product that's being grown and planted. Then you have the manufacturing capabilities. And then as you're kind of scaling that, like, moving into the areas of the world that might have more stringent QC and or EPA related requirements for things that are being brought in, i.e. the US. You're moving into the next phase of this is, we have the product, we have the ability to make the product. Now we need to be able to make the product on a consistent basis that is going to have the quality that is going to be necessary to be shipped reliably into the United States for commercial use, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And getting to scale. So be able to become a primary global building material, which is what's going to be required to turn this into a true climate solution. We need to be able to get and so that the two sides of that is scaling supply and scaling production. And so we're doing both of those.
Both scaling production and then also working on the efficiency of said production.
Yeah,
to lower
that's so true.
costs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Wonderful. That was a great response. I think that there's a lot of really valuable insights when people are looking to grow their business. They're not necessarily always thinking about all different sides. You're
Sure.
doing it on a global level, and you have so many different moving parts. It's incredible to kind of see where you guys are headed and what you've done with where you're at currently.
Thank you.
That said, that's a good segue into our next section, which is the market edge. What's a trend or a direction? Obviously, you guys are, I said it previously, pathfinders in a lot of this.
Sure.
Movement, though, that you see a lot of construction kind of working towards, that you're trying to aim to capitalize on?
Sure. So what's seen as a significant climate strategy right now is mass timber construction. They just changed the U.S. building code to allow 18 stories in mass timber.
Do me a favor, define mass timber for the audience.
Sure. Yeah, you bet. What it is basically taking elements. It's like glue laminated timber. So you basically take 2x4s, 2x6s, 2x8s, 2x10s, and glue them all together. If you're making beams, everything's running in the same direction. If you're making floor panels, it's generally what they call a cross-laminated timber. So the intermediate plies are running the other direction. So you get strength in two directions. And then those elements are prefabricated off-site. And so construction site can go from, what's months to a year or more of on-site construction to a matter of weeks, where the assembly is just going as fast as the parts arrive.
It's like full-scale Lincoln Logs.
Full-scale Lincoln Logs, yeah. When you look at the fact that the square footage of buildings on Earth is going to double in 40 years, that's how we need to do it, is with materials that are capturing and holding carbon rather than creating emissions. The challenge with wood is that when you harvest it, you're killing the tree. So that's a bit of a challenge. You kind of knock the sequestration of the land back to near zero and, starting off again. So being able to be a player in that industry and help the two or three things. One of them is we can help with log utilization. As you mentioned, the harvest cycles for trees has gotten much shorter. As a result of that, though, there's a lot more sapwood, and you're not seeing the same structural numbers you would see out of, a 100-year-old tree. And so
what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so like a Douglas fir, where the bamboo we're using is about twice as strong as the Douglas fir on it's called the moment of elasticity, which is the measurement of resistance to deflection. And that's a significant factor with beams and slabs and things like that. But the mass timber is really helping in terms of bringing awareness to alternatives to concrete and steel. And there was a building that recently went up in Oakland that was mass plywood, and that building went up 25% faster than conventional construction and 15% less expensive. And the company that made the mass plywood panels, we've already been in conversation with them about integrating our product into their product when we hit the price point. So that's, we'll need to get to scale for that. But, like I said, 7 years and all of a sudden you're harvesting 20,000 acres rather than a few thousand, which we're doing now.
Let's move on to the next section of the podcast. This is a section that I like to call the Bullseye Breakdown. And in the Bullseye Breakdown, we give you an opportunity to kind of highlight, even more so than we already have, what makes your product special.
Bamboo may be the only resource on the planet that the more you use of it, the better things get for everybody along the supply chain. It's non-extractive, it's regenerative, it's rapidly regenerative. And so that's really the piece with it, is simply by using the Rizome and Bamboo Living products, you're actually participating in a global climate solution. And you're getting a beautiful product at the same time with very high structural properties. The Bamboo Living houses have been through multiple Category 5 hurricanes, up to 320 kilometers per hour, about 200 miles per hour, and earthquakes up to 6.9 on the Richter scale. So they're incredibly durable, resilient, and beautiful.
This section of the podcast is the best bad advice. It's our signature segment, and it's kind of one of these things that as you're rolling through your career, everybody has, an opinion. Everybody has some advice on your pivots, on your moves, on your directions. Through your career, there's probably been one piece of bad advice that someone has told you that you're so glad you never took. What is that piece of bad advice, and how's that affected you today?
I was trying to think about that, and honestly, opportunities that looked significant, but they didn't resonate with me. When I first moved to Maui, I started working for a really great architectural firm, really nice folks, one of the larger firms. And pretty quickly they were like, hey, we'd like to have you consider getting on a partner path with us. And I just couldn't get myself to do it. It was going to work in an air-conditioned building. I was never in the ocean. It was, there early and leaving late. And I just thought, I moved to Hawaii to have an experience of Hawaii, and I'm not getting it here. And so I just, bowed out and took some projects here and there to kind of make ends meet, and, just started, scrambling and hustling to, keep things going.
Well, it's betting on yourself is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Knowing that there's a path for you that, following the tried and true and working towards 401k is not for everybody. And it's a common thread on the people that I talk to. It's,
Sure.
we talked in an earlier episode about there being two types of people. There's people who are built to be founders, CEOs, innovators,
Sure.
and there are people who are not. And that's fine. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not one is not better than the other because, well, I'll tell you what, I've never worked so hard for so little money, when I started my first company.
Yeah.
And it's
Same.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you worked your
Exactly.
tail off more than you ever
just
would working
hustle.
for
Yeah.
somebody else.
Right. Exactly. And I'm still working 7 days a week on this thing. So,
Exactly.
yeah. Yeah.
But you love
The-
it.
Yeah. And I love it. I
it's
truly do. It feeds my soul. Yeah. Yeah. And, there's one piece I wanted to mention. It wasn't bad advice, but it was kind of the opposite of that. When I finished graduate school, we were family friends with the founders of Skidmore Rowings and Merrill, and I was assuming I would go to work for them. And I mentioned that to my dad, and he was like, "Is that what you really want to do?" And just the fact that he would say that, it really kind of opened up my world. And I said, "No, I'm not doing that. I'm going to go." I moved to a yoga ashram and delayed the onset of adulthood by almost a decade. Super low stress, really fun. It was like year-round summer camp. And it was the best decision I ever made. And, it was really the result of my dad asking me that question of, is this really what you want to do?
Well, I resemble that.
No.
I'm delaying the onset of adulthood for about 3 decades at this point. Let's talk about some takeaway shots here. So ultimately, David, thank you very much for being a part of this podcast today. And, if we're going to recap things that we need to kind of take away from this discussion, it's to always persevere when you hit a wall. Find a different way.
Yeah.
Look to pivot. If you believe in what you're doing and you really know that you're in the right spot, there's always going to be a way for it to move forward.
Truly. Yeah.
You just have to find it. All right, everybody, that's our show for this week. We really appreciate you being here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this. Do everything you can to get it out there because we are super excited to be giving you insights on what it takes to hit the mark.